What's the cheapest thing your family did growing up? My dad and I would play hit the log with the rock. We played it a few times a week when he got home from work and I loved it. I would get home from school before him and gather about 30-50 good rocks for throwing. Little did I know, Dad was stressed at work with very little money and that was what he came up with to play a few evenings a week. My dad was embarrassed by this game and some of his homemade toys, although I look very fondly on these memories. There's no job application or interview for being a father, but sometimes the right people find the job anyways. You know those horses outside the supermarket you paid a quarter to make it rock back and forth? My dad used to just put us on them and shake it by hand. They were always broken when I was a kid. My dad wasn't happy with the service at our local hospital when I was born, so when my mom became pregnant with my younger brother in 1978, he went to the library, he took out some books on midwifery, and delivered John in their bedroom. I was 8 years old and it seemed reasonable to me at the time. He did it again in 1983 when Teddy was born. The morning after Teddy was born, my mom handed me a bulging garbage bag and said, "Mark, take this out to the garbage. Make sure you get it in the can with the lid on tight. It has my placenta in it. I don't want the dogs getting into it." My grandfather saved all his old glass eyes. He had one due to a war injury. It had to be replaced every couple of years. He saved them so we wouldn't use expensive charcoal to create the eyes on snowmen. Unintentional benefit, the hyper-realistic snowman eyes scared the heck out of every passing motorist. I'm laughing so hard at this. My dad would bring cheese slices in his pocket to fast food places because our coupons were for hamburgers, not cheeseburgers. Some places they overcharge for adding a slice of cheese. Instead of going on a day out to the zoo or the cinema or something like that, we would go to Glasgow Sheriff Court to watch people get sentenced. Great day out TBH. Me and a couple friends did this in high school. It was a mildly enjoyable way to spend an afternoon. My dad decided that he wanted to give his kids a good life, so he went to college when my brother and I were little. We were super poor. My parents would buy 25-pound bags of rice, oats, and other grains to save money. One such time, we opened a bag of rice and some of it was wiggling. It was infested with maggots. We tossed all the rice in the freezer to kill the little guys, then put it all in water, because the maggots float. Skim the floaters off the top and you're good to go. We were poor, but my brother and I never went hungry. Thanks Mom and Dad. My parents bought groceries at a thrift store. One time I was eating my cereal when I noticed it was moving in the milk. My dad laughed and said not to worry about the bugs because they don't have bones. We always saved wrapping paper. It really took the fun out of opening presents. You always had to be careful to not rip it and not crumple it, so you could use it as many times as possible. But when I grew up I discovered that wrapping paper costs about $3 per acre, but I still can't bring myself to rip the stuff. We used the Sunday comics. They were printed in color and therefore counted as wrapping paper. Mom is a tiny, 4 feet 10 woman who looks much younger than she is. About 20 years ago, when she was in her late 30s, she went trick-or-treating with my younger brothers and I, like a good parent should, except she dressed up with a huge witch hat, oversized black dress, and heavy face paint and got candy with us. We got a lot of free snacks that year. I did this with my kids, too. The first few Halloweens we went trick-or-treating. I'd use a mask over my entire head and go up like an older sister with my kids. We'd hit all the good neighborhoods and I'd let them keep all the candy in a big storage container in the kitchen. They'd each pick a piece every day after school, and it would last almost until Christmas. We had a meat night once a week. The meat was a can of tuna mixed into a box of whatever noodles or rice and mixed could be had cheapest. We could have just been straight poor. Almost all of our furniture was from the neighbor's trash. Super embarrassing when I'd have friends over and none of the furniture or decor matched like in their homes. When I bought brand new furniture for my first big move I dang near cried in exhilaration. My parents would buy powdered milk instead of the regular stuff. Us kids did not like it, so they tried to trick us by mixing it in an empty milk jug. We still knew. Lived in a burned out garage. It had a dirt floor, no glass in the windows, so we covered them with cardboard and curtains. There was no door in the doorway, so we made one out of a refrigerator box. No power, so we used candles for light, and cooked on an open fire that had an oven rack suspended over it with cement blocks. No plumbing aside from a water spigot, so we went to the bathroom in the bushes, and bathed in a kiddie pool. It was an interesting 6 months. My grandmother used to babysit me before I was school aged. She never had a license, so we took the city bus everywhere and walked. One of our walking routes was past a country club. Every time we passed it she would tell me to go look at the pool. So I used to run up there, weave past the bushes and look through the cracks of the fence and look at the pool and the kids playing it. I can see it clear as day in my head. So growing up I never had access to a pool, but my grandmother used to let me look at one. I laughed to myself thinking how sad it is to look at rich kids playing in a pool. I thought there was going to be a while my grandmother went into the locker room and stole windbreakers. Lots and lots of food boxes, plus dumpster diving. Dumpster diving actually gave us way more than people would think. Like my mom would dumpster dive the nicer florists in the upper income part of town around Valentine's Day, and they would throw out full bouquets of roses if they were there more than a few days, well before they wilted. So she would grab some cheapo vases from Goodwill and get some ribbons and make some nice looking bouquet vases for half or less of the cost at a florist. She actually brought in tons of extra income that way. There was also a used books games store that would throw away old electronics that would sit too long or games that they had in excess. Numerous times we'd go behind their store and find boxes full of old games for current gen systems. Once even a newish looking monitor. We traded a lot of the stuff back to the other locations they had. I've totally eaten dumpster dived food too. Once we found a huge box of those little individual bags of chips that came in different flavors, none open or expired either. This kinda really makes me want to dumpster dive. My mom saw no sense wasting $sign on Kleenex. Need to blow your nose? Use dirty clothing from wash basket, or whatever you just took off. We also used whatever paper product was available for bathroom tissue, paper napkin, paper towel, used facial washcloths for sanitary pads when no pads on hand. We also bought canned veggies from a prison cannery. I could go on and on. We never had money for basic household needs but always had money for mom's cigarettes. That last part really hurt. I hate seeing kids that are lacking basic needs, but the parents still have the money for cigarettes, beer, liquor, or drugs. I never considered we were poor when I was a kid, but as I've gotten older and thought back fondly to those times, I realized all our quaint habits were in fact a result of our poverty, like drinking powdered milk, going to the food bank. I thought it was just a nice friend giving us things, making beaded pins and selling them out of a radio flyer at the flea market for income, making .89 Jiffy muffins and selling them door to door for 1.00 a piece. Everyone, parents and siblings, sleeping in the family room because it was the only place warm enough in the winter, thanks to a wood stove, and the only place cool enough in the summer, thanks to our single window unit. My father desperately cutting down trees in our yard to feed the aforementioned wood stove. Playing with the same toys my parents played with in the 60s because they were the only toys we had. The gag rubber hand was our favorite toy. Bread bags in our boots to waterproof them. When my older brother was in preschool, he was told to bring snow pants because they were going to play outside that day, Minnesota. My family didn't have any for him, so my mom sent him with sweatpants to put over his regular pants. They made him sit inside by himself. Sweden here. This was the accepted way to waterproof your shoes for hiking with the Scouts. Now all the kids have real equipment from a real outdoors store. Amateurs. My mother steals from hospitals. I'm there in the city at 17 or 18 waiting to finally be seen by a doctor regarding surgery on my leg. Finally about to be rid of a life-threatening injury that has caused me nothing but pain. And I'm sitting there trying to convince my mother to, just for freaking once, not steal bandages and random vials of medicine like she's raiding Ariel. You're not alone. My son's dad does the same thing. Anytime we go to a doctor's office or hospital, he raids the cupboards for medical supplies. Not medicine luckily, but gloves, gauze, etc. It is horribly embarrassing, and I dread the day he gets caught and I have to explain his bizarre rummaging to an angry doctor. He's a redditor too, so here's to calling you out, you thieving hoarder. We lived under a bridge. My mother was an addict, and despite my father trying his best, he got laid off, and we didn't have any savings. I was too young to understand and even thought it was cool because I didn't know anyone else who lived outside. My dad would scrape together what he could and feed my sister and I without eating himself, claiming he wasn't hungry. Life was strange growing up. We ended up living with my grandma for a while after a week and a half on the street, claiming he wasn't hungry. This always brings on the onions for me when I hear about poor parents. Being hungry makes me feel wretched, but I can imagine having enough food for the kids and not me, and having no choice but to do it. But yeah, don't let them know because kids are sweet and they'd want to give you some. My dad never ate when mom and I did. He'd sit at the table with us, but he always had stomach trouble that didn't seem to clear up until we had finished our meals. Then, if there was food left, he'd say, well, I guess I should try to eat something. If there wasn't anything left, he'd say that he just didn't feel like his stomach could handle anything. I didn't realize until I was an adult that he was waiting to be sure that my mom and I had enough to eat before feeding himself, and that he went to bed hungry on more than one occasion. It didn't occur to me what he was doing, because his mother, younger sister and younger brother confirmed that he'd done this since he was around 10. He went hungry as a kid, to make sure that they didn't. Nowadays, even the simplest meal at his house looks like a Thanksgiving feast for an army, but he always fills his plate last and never takes a second helping until everyone else has finished. Your dad is a really good person. Growing up, there were 4 of us kids and our parents would rotate kid of the day, and on Fridays wherever was kid of the day got to pick where we went to dinner. My stepfather would distract us in the basement while my mom did dinner based off the restaurant that was picked. Then when she was done, she'd come downstairs and we'd all go for a ride around block, then come right back home to the restaurant. That was our going out to eat as children. Haha, we did something similar for my mom. My dad would let us pick the restaurant and make up a menu, then he would cook stuff based on our suggestions. Then my brothers and I would be the staff. We were little shoots though, so we made up gross menu items, usually based on roadkill. My mom would put a large plastic bag in her purse when we went to Chinese buffets. She'd put multiple of the same items on her plate and put some of each in the bag. She'd keep going until the bag was full. Chinese for lunch for like a week afterwards. My family has 4 kids, 3 of whom are boys who look very much the same. So during family vacations we would only allow 1 boy to go into the hotel at check-in, lest they knew we were breaking the 4 occupants per room rule. Either the hotel staff didn't notice or didn't care. I am betting that. Or maybe my parents just thought of it as a great way to keep 2 of the 4 kids very well behaved while checking in lest we ruined the family vacation. I guess I never knew my grandmother also did this. I just knew that we always had to wait in the car while she was checking in. She would also bring pastries and juice back to the room for us in the mornings. I doubt I saw a hotel lobby until I was 12. I never really knew how close the financial situation was when I was growing up. My mom did a really good job of being a single mom on a budget. I had bread bags in my boots, powdered milk in my milk, gobbets rather than Transformers, and figures from the black hole rather than Star Wars. I was fed, loved, and happy, and I've let her know that I think she did a good job. My mom once gave me a plastic pasta strainer from Walmart for my 12th birthday. We were really poor at the time. She wasn't just like a terrible person. She also refused to buy paper towels and tissues cause they were too expensive, so we used a lot of toilet paper. My mom once gave me a power strip for Christmas cause she didn't have money but still wanted to give me a present. It still works great. Thanks, Mom. A family outing consisted of going for a drive. We would all pile into the family car, and my dad would drive to some place we hadn't been before to look around. We didn't stop for food or to shop. Mom would pack some snacks and drinks. That just sounds like a road trip. Grew up in Michigan with 4 other siblings. We the family would go up north. We would stop at Hot N Now. It was a fast food type restaurant with cheap hamburgers. I think they were $0.39. My dad would place the order as follows. Dad, I'd like 21 hamburgers with onions. Sister, Dad, I don't like onions. Dad, tough crap. Dad, sorry about that. I'd like 21 hamburgers with onions, 2 large fries, and 1 large Coke with light ice. He hated it when they would fill half the cup with ice. Mind you, this was for 7 people. That pop would go around the Suburban exactly one time before it was empty, and you got exactly 1.3 seconds to take the biggest drink you could, because it wasn't coming back around again. The rest of the 3-hour ride was the waiting game on who the unlucky soul was that had to tell my father they had to pee. Dad, I have to pee. God dang it, we were making record time. Can't you hold it? Every single one of us had to pee. Sounds like an episode of Malcolm in the Middle. Fried potato peels. It's actually a really tasty snack. Also, gathering the last pieces of soap left in the bathroom, press them together and have a multicolored bar of Frankensoap. I loved Frankensoap. My grandparents always had it and I thought it was so cool. I didn't understand that it was because they were very poor. I thought it was special. As a family, we would all pile into the family van and go see Grandma on Vancouver Island. You need to take a ferry and pay per person to do so. So as a family with 4 kids, my parents used this trick. 2 of us kids would hide under a blanket in the back of the van, and then my dad would just say 2 adult tickets and 2 kids. This would save us about $50 each round trip. We had a large garden, and most of our meals came from that. Mum also had some grapes, so she canned grape juice. It was mainly water, and some grapes floating in the top. When you poured, you used the canning lid to hold the grapes in. One night a week our meal was stuff, which was crackers, lunch meat, some grapes or apples, and some sliced cheese. My mom was the queen of the free day. If somewhere was having a day where it was free to get in, we were there. On days when there was nothing free to do, we went to watch the planes take off, feed he ducks, or walk by the creek. She couldn't stand to have me sitting in the house doing nothing all day, and it's a major pet peeve of hers seeing my friends do it with their kids now. Grew up poor. Oh, so many. I wanted a bicycle, but that wasn't going to happen. My sister offered me hers because she didn't ride much, but it was a girl's bike. My father got a wooden dowel and attached it to the frame with some hose clamps, then painted it blue. Now I had a boy's bike. None of my friends seemed to care. My mother was big on patching stitching clothes. If I blew out a knee in my denim jeans, she'd put a patch on both knees so they matched and I didn't look so poor. My father always waited till Christmas Eve to buy a tree because that's when you get the best deals from desperate tree dealers. My grammar school class auctioned off the class Christmas tree on the Friday before Christmas and I won. It was big and heavy, so I dragged it home behind me, leaving a horrid trail of loose needles and tinsel. Once home, my father was thrilled. He fluffed it up as best he could and we tossed on extra tinsel to hide the bare spots. If I think about it, I'm sure I could come up with more. I remember seeing a neighbor help my dad remove a broken hot water heater when I was maybe 5 years old. It was never replaced until my brother and I had it done as adults. What we had for hot water was an old gas log in the basement. When you want a bath, you go down to this thing, open the door, light a match, no pilot light, and turn on the gas, whoosh. Then go upstairs and wait 20 minutes and you had hot water. Viola. But wait 25 minutes and the pressure relief valve would release all the hot water on the floor, usually putting out the flame, but the gas was still on. So, shut off the gas, wait a few minutes and start all over again. Seriously nuts. No lack of money. My dad and mom both worked and we had a better than average income. Looking back, I wonder how we didn't die in an explosion. Not mine, but my mother's story. My mom was on vacation at Disney World when she was a child, and to avoid paying for the overpriced food inside the park, her dad brought a baby stroller filled with food and put a blanket over it to disguise it as a baby and snuck it into the park. I remember running out to the parking lot to eat sandwiches and iced tea out of the trunk of the car with my similarly broke friends. Now Disney has given up and lets you bring food in the park, but I'm too lazy and fancy to bother now. This was back before the days of cell phones, when a payphone cost 20 cents to make a call. My grandparents would take us somewhere and drop us off, maybe to eat, or play at the park or whatever. So we needed to call them to let them know when we were ready for them to pick us up, but they didn't want us to have to spend the 20 cents for the call. So we would make the call, let it ring 2 times, then hang up, then call again, let it ring 2 times and hang up. Since the calls weren't connected, we'd get our 20 cents back. and my grandparents knew we were ready for them to pick us up. We would call collect, and when the operator told us to state our names, so the receiving end would know who was calling, we would say "Mom, pick us up," then Mom simply didn't accept the call. I was about 7 or 8, the only time my family ever went on a real vacation. We went to Epcot in Florida. My dad was the VP of a small Christian school and his annual salary was something like $14K. Needless to say, we had no budget beyond admission. My parents packed a picnic lunch of bologna sandwiches and a gallon of iced tea in a cooler which was left in the parking lot. We got there at open, around 8 or 9, and I figure we ate around noon. By the end of the day, getting dark, it was about 9 and the 3 of us, brother and sister and me, were starving by this time. We wanted to stay for the fireworks which were best viewed near the Festival of Nations. This is, or at least was at this time, nothing but a tourist trap for expensive meals from other cultures, so us kids haven't eaten in like 9 hours and we are being assaulted by the smell of dinner cooking from dozens of small eateries. After about an hour of us whining and bitching, my dad finally relents to my mother's demands that he feed us. So he goes off to find out what he can afford. Turns out the only thing he could afford to get was a single bratwurst from the German establishment. We each got one bite. To this day I have a passionate love of bratwursts because that was the most delicious bite of kraut-covered sausage I've ever eaten. As a SoCal resident, this was totally normal for our Disneyland trips. Being pasholders, we never spent money on food in the parks, so we survived off peanut butter crackers and baby carrots for 10-12-hour days. We stuck it out because if anyone whined about being hungry, we had to leave and go home. It was worth it to us. Also, a seasoned OC kid never complains about waiting in line, ever. There was a point in my childhood when my mom died of cancer. My dad lost his job, while still paying bills for my mom, and I sustained a major head injury and was hospitalized for 2 weeks, all within the same year. We were dead broke. We were on every government program you could be on. We had lots of food in generic black and white USDA labels, dry milk, government cheese, honey, etc. My dad would go into the woods and come back with dead rabbits and squirrels he shot so we could eat meat. Props to your dad, for real. We had central air, except I never knew what it was until the first time we hosted a family reunion at our house when I was 13. I just figured that everyone's house was super hot upstairs during the summer and that keeping the windows open from about April until November was normal. Turns out, my dad never used it because when he and my mom moved in, the AC had broken. The fix was a $25 hose that a friend of his installed the day before our family showed up for the reunion. For 13 years they'd lived in the house and hadn't bothered to do a $25 fix to save money. Oh yeah, and the time my dad didn't pay our health insurance premiums for almost 3 years and didn't tell my mom. That was neat. Hadn't bothered to do a $25 fix to save money. To be fair, it's not the $25 he was trying to save. It's the AC electric bill every month after it was fixed that he was worried about. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.